Let's pop across to Deepti Laurent, who's going to take us through the front pages of the World Press this morning. Deepti, a lot of dialogue about that EU summit with Turkey today.
That's right, Hala. There's a lot of negative press in the morning, in the papers this morning, which I'll get to in a minute. First of all, I want to draw your attention to this cartoon from Imad Hajjaj. He's a cartoonist for a Jordanian paper. It depicts really a very sad reality that while EU leaders are urging migrants to stay away from coming to Europe, stay away from Europe, there's a vicious cycle of oppression for Syrians, be it the Islamic State group on the left with a knife, or the Syrian government with the bombs, or the EU by putting up these borders, putting up these walls, and it's a very sad reality, I think, that depicts this situation.
Well, The Independent, they've penned a fiery editorial this morning ahead of the summit, haven't they?
Really, really fiery, very, very harsh words. Sealing the deal, that's a headline from this editorial. The semantics alone are very, very telling. There's a lot of sarcasm, but importantly, there's a lot of exasperation, which I think many are feeling about about the failure of EU leaders really to take a stance on this issue. One of the main points will be, of course, convincing Turkey to take back economic migrants. And the paper really takes to task Donald Tusk. The EU Council President is in, quote, Euro la-la land and wildly out of touch if he believes that sending economic migrants back to Turkey will help break the people smuggling business. The reason being that the people smugglers have been there before the Syrian crisis, and even more so since the war. And they're the ones making money off misery, and they have the upper hand. It's been this way for years, while Europe has been very lax about its external borders.
Well, let's move on to a rather interesting article now, at least for its dramatic shift in viewpoint on the issue. We're talking, of course, about the Turkish paper Zaman.
That's right. That's a Turkish paper, of course, that was seized by the government on Friday and saw violent protests over the weekend. This is our front page this morning. European Union looks to Turkey to ease its own migrant burden. Now, the formerly anti-government newspaper is now pushing a rather pro-government line, EU looking to Turkey as though the EU is its savior, its salvage point. They say that the EU has offered, quote, several sweeteners to get Turkish authorities to crack down on migration, notably its adherence to the EU, as a member of the EU. So the paper is really putting Turkey in a very favorable light this morning, quite the opposite last week.
Okay, let's move on to an extraordinary story now of France awarding a Legion of Honour to a Saudi prince. What's going on here?
That's right. It's a Legion of Honour, which, of course, was established by Napoleon in 1802. And quite frankly, I think he'd be rolling in his grave if he knew who the latest recipient was. France discreetly awarded such a distinguished honour to a Saudi prince. His name is Mohammed bin Naif for, I quote, his efforts in the fight against terrorism and extremism. Now, this is despite the country's appalling human rights record. Just on Sunday, Saudi carried out its 70th execution. And of course, France was at the forefront of those condemnations when they carried out those mass executions on New Year's Eve. So it's very, very peculiar.
Very strange. What's the reaction been then to this award?
Well, it depends on which side you're looking from. Now, of course, the Saudis are thrilled about the award, but here in France, the reaction is laughable, if not indignant. One Twitter user even wonders if the Legion of Honour is also up for sale these days. Now, it must be said that François Hollande himself received a similar honour during his last visit to Saudi Arabia, so it could be a case of mutual back-scratching. But many may wonder where the prince fits in what's a distinguished laureate of recipients that include war vets, political activists, and writers. But mind you, other past laureates also include Vogue editor Anna Wintour and Liza Minnelli. So there may be many questions about just how much importance it holds today.
Crikey, maybe I should aim for one as well.